Alright, Comer Lexa, I'm finally doing it. I'm turning heel. At least for this video.
Is that why you're wearing an eye patch?
Yeah. But anyway, here in LumberJillville, I work really hard to keep this a positive and happy place. But I have to tell you, sometimes things creep on my mind. And there is a lot that I have to get off my chest today.
The only thing you need to get off your chest is that dumb Alicia Fox shirt.
Ha! I knew that this shirt would get you and everyone watching out there to not like me for today's video.
I'm so sure that's why you're wearing a shirt with a furry on it. You have a convention to go to or something.
No. Oh man. You know what? That does kind of look like a furry, doesn't it?
You know what? With that eye patch, I could call you Nick Furry.
Huh? Oh, I get it. Instead of Nick Fury, Nick Furry, because the furry, the eye patch. Hardy frickin' har, Comer Alexa. Hardy frickin' har!
Well, at least you aren't wearing fox ears.
Yeah. No ears. Yeah, that's a good one. Well, I better go get started on this video here. It's just welcome to LumberJillville. Women's wrestling lives here. Now, before the Jillies Award Show here in about a week and a half, I wanted to do a video that covered my top 5 worst women's wrestling figures of 2021. Now, keep in mind, this is just my opinion, and I respect all of y'all's opinions out there, so just keep that in mind, and even let me know in the comments what the worst figures are in your mind. But before we get to that top 5 list, I wanted to cover 2 figures that I feel like got a horrible reputation in 2021, and undeservingly so. Alright, calm down. Now, before I go into little video segments, before my top 5 countdown, trying to defend these figures a little bit, I just wanted to go over some of the reasons I think these figures got such a bad reputation this past year. And I think the number one reason is there's some really prominent wrestling figure influencers out there that for some reason targeted these figures and said how horrible they were and kind of made a mockery of them. And a lot of people just tag along to those people, tag along to the influencers and base their judgment and their critiques based off of what someone else says. When in all actuality, they don't have them in person, okay? And if you have these in person, in my opinion, you'll see that they're really not as terrible as some of those influencers made them sound like. Also, another thing that kind of bothers me, and one of the main reasons why I have this channel to try to raise the respect level of women's wrestling figures, is if you ask wrestling figure collectors for this past year, the worst ones of the year, a lot of them are going to target these women's wrestling figures, when in all actuality, there were tons of horrible, and I mean horrible, men's wrestling figures. The AEW line alone had some really horrible ones. And that leads into my next idea, and that's that I think big stars or big names, for some reason they get a better pass over names that might not be as household, like Ember Moon and Riho. And I just think that's kind of weird. So, yeah, it just really bothered me all year seeing all the hate on this Riho and on this Ember Moon, when I know they're not like the best figures. They're not in the top 10 for best figures of the year, but they're really not as bad, and they don't deserve all the hate that they're getting, honestly. And I'm going to explain why, so let's dive right in and take a look. The first figure I'm going to cover that has a bad, undeserving reputation for this past year is Ember Moon from Basic Series 125. Alright, so let's start off with this face scan here, and in my opinion, this actually does a pretty good job of resembling Ember Moon. Now, if you even compare it to her more popular NXT Elite here on the right, I just don't see Ember in that scan at all, but the reason why a lot of people like that figure is all the little accessories. I mean, it comes with a freaking mask to cover her face. So, in my opinion, that kind of masks the horrible scan that they had in that Elite figure. So, I actually like this basic scan a lot better. I actually like the application of the makeup on her face, and they do a fine job with this hair sculpt and hair coloration. I just think that it's a far superior scan and sculpt as far as the face goes. Now, obviously, the main problem this figure has is in that upper body, that painted on top. Really, it should be a molded textured top. However, this got pointed out by a lot of wrestling figure collectors, YouTubers, whatever. And the thing is, this is not new. I mean, how many of the women's basics over this past year, couple years now, have had just the painted on top? And it does work in some cases, but in some, like Ember, it doesn't work. And I can agree with that, and I understand. But really, that is the main flaw of this figure, in my opinion. Because even if you look at the overall body sculpt and mold that they used, it does resemble Ember Moon really well. And moving on to her bottoms, the painted on tights even have little holes painted on that work nicely, and we get this nice little molded accessory here that goes in her lower body. And that's something else we really don't get in women's wrestling figures, are accessories. So the fact that we got this on her is pretty good, honestly. Now, I know, like, it's not a great figure by any means, but in my opinion, without a doubt, this is the best Ember Moon figure we've got. And yeah, that's where I stand on this. And the other figure I'm going to cover that got an undeserving bad reputation this past year was Riho from Unrivaled Series 3. So let's start off with the most controversial aspect of this figure, and that's the face scan. And I get it. It is not a great scan, but there have been so many worse this past year alone that I feel like this is really unwarranted. Now, I think the biggest flaw or the biggest mistake that they made was giving her this expression. It's a very silly expression, okay? And it definitely didn't do her any favors. Now, I get that it doesn't really look that great, okay? But if you actually look at these images here that I found, did some research, it's really not that far off to how she actually looks in an expression similar to this figure's. But like I said, I think one of the big aspects of people not being familiar with Riho and herself is a big issue why they just didn't like this figure and thought the scan was terrible, when in all actuality it's really not that far off. You know, Riho's very beautiful in her own unique way, but I don't think they did her any favors by choosing this expression here. Now, what's good about this figure? Everything else, literally. I mean, this was technically the first women's wrestling figure we got. Now, Brandy did come before her, but let's be honest here. Riho is one of the top wrestlers in the world, one of my favorite wrestlers, a tremendous athlete, and she is a true wrestler, okay? And we'll get to that Brandy figure coming up. But, I mean, just look at her attire. They did an excellent job here. Now, there are some weird things. Like, if you look at her top, it's almost like a molded tube top went around. But they did paint her top nice. They really added some extra detail. We have a lot of molding on this figure, even with the straps of her top that goes up, goes around her neck. And all the way in the back, we have this top that has folds on it. Now, what really makes this figure stand out attire-wise are all these little soft rubber pieces that are very delicate and also very unique and accurate to the attire she has in real life. I think they did a tremendous job here. Now, where they could have really messed up is if they just tried to paint on these designs, or even if they had hard plastic, it would have looked weird. But in my opinion, this attire, I mean, it's close to a 10 out of 10. Even up on her shoulder, the soft rubber allows for her to move in all different motions without inhibiting her movement. So I think the attire is great. I think it's excellent. Now, I know they could have added this pink, a metallic shine to this pink, and they didn't. But like I said, a lot of people, if they had to give this a score, they'd give it a really low score, when in all actuality, this is a pretty awesome figure. And like I mentioned before with the scan, I just think they didn't choose a very good expression to use. But in all actuality, it's really not that far off. But yeah, I'll be willing to say it. I like this Riho figure. All right. So I just had to get that off my chest. I was sick of seeing people post about how horrible those figures are when they're not that horrible. And remember, that is just my opinion, so I hope y'all respect it, because I respect all of your opinions. Now, before we start my top 5 countdown, I want to first and foremost say that I did order a Masters of the WWE Universe Wave 7 China, and it's not here yet. But I have a feeling, just from images that I've seen, that would have made my top 5 list, okay? But like I said, I don't want to put a figure on my countdown unless I have it in person, so she got lucky. But we'll do a full-length review of that whenever I get it. Now, diving into my top 5, I wanted to start with number 5, which is a very unique figure, okay? And that's Brandy Rhodes in her Unrivaled 1B release, okay? Now, there are a lot of reasons why it is number 5, and it made my top 5 for the worst figures of the year. And I'm going to get into those. But first and foremost, I have to say, if anyone follows her on social media or has seen her on TV as of late, it's this. It's this. Yeah, and that's one of her tweets from a couple years ago, but that's what it is. It's very hard to watch, okay? I really don't like what she's doing for the women in AEW here. Now, she does have a chief executive position and all the power to her, but I don't really think she should be on TV as much because, yeah, it's what I just showed y'all. Anyway, that has nothing to do with the figure, so let's dive right into this figure. At number 5, we have Brandy Rhodes from AEW Unrivaled Series 1B. Alright, so starting off with this figure, now, this made my top 5 because technically Series 1B did come out within this past calendar year. Now, I know it is a straight re-release of Series 1, but I don't really want to hold that against this figure because in Series 1, Unrivaled Series 1, for some reason Brandy was short-packed, really hard to find, and even today, very expensive to get. And the fact that we got a re-release of the figure so collectors could pick it up, I mean, that's definitely a cool thing. But to me, this figure just ain't it. And the fact that Series 1 is so expensive for what to me is the equivalent to a WWE Basic is what this is, in my opinion. It's kind of ridiculous that it was short-packed, and it kind of bothered me at the time because it showed a lack of confidence that a woman's figure would sell, in my opinion. But I think a big issue with that is the fact they chose Brandy, and that's the number one knock I have on this figure is why was Brandy the first AEW woman released in the line? They had such a talented roster. They have such a talented women's roster. And the fact that they chose Cody Rhodes' wife, who is an executive officer, and she was managing Cody at this time, the fact that they chose her to be the first figure, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. You know, it's like, I get it, you're in the clique, you're a part of the founding fathers, so you get a figure first, but there's so many talented women that should have been in the line before her, let's be honest here. Now, I know she's wrestled in the past. I'm not holding that against her, but I just thought there were a lot of other options that should have been used over Brandy as the first release. Now, looking at the figure itself, it's just weird, y'all. It's just weird. It looks like an alien. The proportions are very strange. The belly button is up, like up in the middle of her midsection, and it's just a very bizarre body. I do call this the body design, or the alien body design, and the reason I'm holding it up is because Lil Brand here doesn't stand, okay? She really doesn't. Now, I have tried a bunch of different motions and movements, and if you get it just right, it might stand, but holy crap, it doesn't stand very good. And it sucks because we don't have any figure stands for these huge peg holes in the AEW figures. So that's a huge flaw on this figure is the fact that it really doesn't stand very well. Now, the reason why I kind of compare this to a WWE Basic, this is like an AEW Basic figure, is it comes with nothing. This is what you get in that package. That's it. We don't even get extra hands, and I'm not a huge fan of extra hands in all actuality, but we don't even get those here. We get nothing, no accessories, nothing. This is just it. So even looking closer at the face, I feel like the head sculpt is too small. Like something's off about it, and I think the sculpt is just too small. And I think the scan really doesn't look like her. It's rather generic. I really don't think it's very good. Also, the attire, now it was very tight and form-fitting on the night that she wore this, so I think they get a pass for it being just painted on, but because there's like no molding in this attire, you think that they'd really go the extra mile and give her some accessories or give her a little more detail, and it's just not there. So this is in retrospect. When I first reviewed this figure, I probably gave it a decent score because it was AEW's first women's figure, and I thought they did a pretty good job. But in retrospect, after this past year where we've seen the women's figures get better with each release, hats off to Jazzwares. That Ty Conti, 11 out of 10 is what I got it. It's amazing the strides that they made from this Brandy to that Ty. But yeah, I mean, this being released in 1B in this previous calendar year, this is just number 5 for me because, yeah, it doesn't stand, doesn't really look that great, the body mold is weird, and I would have rather seen a million other AEW women over Brandy first. At number 4, we have Bianca Belair from the WWE WrestleMania 38 Basic line. All right, so I'm going to be honest with y'all. In this past year, in my opinion, I really don't think there are too many terrible women's wrestling figures. However, this Bianca is at number 4 because of one gigantic, inexcusable omission. And that is the silver vertical stripes on her tights. They're missing. Mattel decided not to put them on her for whatever reason, and that to me is inexcusable. How do you forget, or how do you not put on such an intricate and important part of her attire? I mean, look at her top. The top is painted on very intricately. We get those vertical stripes, the lips, everything's painted on clean. We even get the lips in the back. Move to the bottoms, no stripes. And the funny thing is, she only had the stripes on the front of her tights on this night. So how hard would that have been to put those on? And I don't want to hear, oh, it's a cost-cutting measure. That's why they didn't do it. It would have made it too expensive. Because let's be honest here, these women's basics for the last couple years have not had a lot of detail put into them. There's hardly any molding, so what makes the women's basics good is the paint application. And here they showed with the top, hey, they can do Bianca just fine as far as the paint application in her top, even with no molding. But in the bottoms, you have to rely on the paint application and accuracy to make it a good figure, and here we don't have a key part of that attire, and that's ridiculous. And especially if you look at the same WrestleMania basic line, Hulk Hogan has like a unique molded top, he has elite style arms, so why can't Bianca get her freaking stripes? That's just, it makes this figure an eyesore because it's missing such a key part of that attire. And that ticks me off because Bianca deserves better in my opinion, she really does. Now, there are little tiny things that don't bother me a whole lot, but it might bother some, such as these really skinny long legs that they've used time and time again. We saw them on the Rhea Ripley basic. We've seen them on a couple Charlotte basics. And they're just, they don't really show Bianca Belair's muscular physique, you know? Like, they don't fit Bianca here. They're way too skinny and goofy looking. She has no neck. That scan's definitely not the best, but it's not terrible. But yeah, like I said, the reason this is number 4 is the absence of a key feature of her attire. Like, why would they not add those silver vertical stripes to the front of her tights? I don't get it. At number 3, we have Bull Nakano from the Cella Toys Wrestling Megastars line. Alright, so let's talk about Bull Nakano from Cella Toys here. Now, when I first heard that we were going to get the first ever female in Hasbro style, I was pumped. And when I found out it was Bull Nakano, oh, I went crazy. I could not wait. Now, I grew up playing with Hasbros. I never had any. But my buddy, the Treasurer, did. And we played with them all the time. And even as a kid, I thought it was weird that we never got any females in that Hasbro line. And even in today, you know, being a women's wrestling figure collector YouTuber, it's real bizarre. And it really bothers me that we never got any females in that Hasbro style. And the fact that we were finally getting one, oh boy, I couldn't wait. I pre-ordered it. I was excited. And then it showed up. Now that might be harsh, but there are reasons behind that statement. And the number one reason is, it's not in scale with Hasbro's. It's way too small. And you wouldn't think so. And you really can't tell unless you put it next to Hasbro's. And when you put it next to the Hasbro's, this Bull Nakano figure is tiny. Now, I heard that they were going to make some updates and re-releases that made it more in scale, but that's inexcusable. You're going to make re-releases? What about those that really wanted this figure, that really wanted a female representation to put alongside the Hasbro's? What about us? We just get stuck with this miniature version? That stinks, okay? Another thing. This figure is $25 about, plus $10 shipping, so we'll say $35. And this is not, by any means, worth $35 in my opinion. Now, I get it's a smaller company, and a lot of the smaller companies, they have to charge extra, okay? But for me, you know, I have to watch my budget really close, and especially because I buy all the women's figures. So when I got this one, I only ordered one because I was like, man, that's kind of steep. You know, $35 for a wrestling figure? I don't know. And I got it, and I almost felt guilty after getting it because I was like, this is not worth $35. It has no action features whatsoever. It's way underscaled, and it has 3 points of articulation. And the reason I say that is because the neck, we don't get no movement, nothing there. So we get the arms going up and down, and then the waist. So yeah, it's literally just a chunk of plastic. And it's really disappointing, and that's why it's number 3. It's such a disappointment because they really had a chance to do something great here. And to me, they slipped and fell on their faces with this figure. Now, the re-release, if it is upscaled, that might make it better, okay? That might make it okay. But the fact that the original release here was so undersized to where it can't even be displayed with the Hasbro men, it sucks, you know? Like, the females deserve better. Bull Nakano deserves better. And what we have here is just a chunk of plastic that really doesn't look good displayed next to any other wrestling figures. So, yeah, big time disappointment. At number 2, we have Trish Stratus from WWE's Elite Series 88 regular version. Oh, it's time to rock and roll, everybody. And anybody that watches LumberJillville is not surprised by my number 2 here being the regular version of that Elite 88 Trish. Now, why is it number 2 and not number 1? Well, at least we get a black and pink theme here. It kind of works, you know, if you put her on display on an Attitude Era shelf. I mean, that's great. Until you get close to this figure and you see all the flaws that accompany it, okay? Starting off with the accessories, we get this black soft goods trench coat type thing. And the reason I say type thing is it's really cheap. It's very thin. I mean, look at it. It looks more like a lingerie robe than anything else. You know, there's absolutely no thickness to it. It's just cheap. Real cheap. And then this cowboy hat is way too big. It's way too oversized. It's just a solid pink. It looks like a dollar store accessory here. And it looks giant. So we take that off. Let's take a closer look at the face here. Whoa! Now, I did do a full review of this in the Chase version, obviously. And that's probably my number one complaint is this scan. I mean, it's terrible. Now, I get mine isn't printed on perfect on this one, but even the Chase version, it looks like crap. Okay? And the lips aren't lined up on mine. It looks like she was blindfolded when she put on her makeup in the morning. And yeah, it looks like she has a mustache, actually, come to think of it. But yeah, this scan sucks. I mean, there's no excuse. This is Trish Stratus, a living legend of women's wrestling. And she can't even get a good scan and sculpt. And the funny thing is, they've done a good job in the past. So why can't they do a good job here? Technology has only advanced. And for some reason, they really slipped and fell on this one. Now, looking at her hair, it's like they were trying to do something different here. But the texture that they have on it, it looks like someone was eating Cheetos or Doritos and they just rubbed their fingers on her hair. It's got this like orange dust. It looks like Cheeto dust on her hair, and it looks horrible. Now, moving on down to the attire here, we get some molding between the chest, but guess what? This is as generic of an Elite upper body that you can get. And that's sad because the Elite figures, even a lot of the Elite women's figures, they have really unique molding a lot of the times. And that's the best part about some of the women's Elites is the unique molding and attention to detail. And here we just get the most generic upper body mold that we could ask for with paint on top. We even have that dimpled belly button that I can't freaking stand. The Victoria's Secret body paint belly button right there. Just black painted on top of that. Should have been smoothed over, but nope. Moving on down to the bottoms here, not much to say. You know, just the pink tights there. And then the rest is just black. But yeah, this figure, I'm telling you, like I have multiples of pretty much every women's Elite and even AEW figure from this past year, women's AEW figure, because I really do find the awesomeness. And even the figures that might not be popular, but this one is so bad that I don't have an extra because I don't want to spend money and get another one to keep MOC. Oh, this is just bad. And the worst women's wrestling figure of 2021, in my opinion, is Trish Stratus Chase version from Elite Series 88. And here she is, everybody. In my opinion, the worst women's wrestling figure by a mile of 2021. Now, why is this Chase version so much worse than the regular version of Elite 88 Trish? Well, mostly due to the fact that we've already gotten Trish in this attire in the basic line. And the sad thing is that basic is arguably better than the Elite. And that should never happen. Now, there are some issues with the basic, like that generic top with the red just painted over. That looks horrible. But overall, it is a much better figure than the Elite. I mean, look at the scan and look at the hair sculpt on that basic. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, why don't you just do a head swap? And I know that you can, but I really like to review, obviously, and display the figures how they are, you know, how they're released, how they're made. That's what I like to really focus on and appreciate. So I really don't like doing swaps or switches a whole lot. And that's why I haven't done that here. But in my opinion, an elite Trish Stratus, you shouldn't have to do a head swap. You're paying a premium price for a premium superstar, a legend. And this is what we got. Like, so bad. And the reason I'm not showing her trench coat, her lingerie trench coat, or her cowboy hat is I can't find her cowboy hat. And I'll be honest, like I mentioned when I was covering all the elites for this past year, I don't care enough about this figure to find that cowboy hat. I want to be done with this figure. And after this video, I am going to be done with this figure. So, yeah, here it is. The worst figure of the year, in my opinion. Horrible. Whew. So that was pretty exhausting, y'all. Now, I first and foremost want to say I do apologize if I came off overly negative or overly critical, because here in LumberJillville, I keep it happy, I keep it positive, I have tons of fun here. But here's the thing. I absolutely love women's wrestling and admire all the women's wrestlers out there. And I have a very deep passion for collecting these women's wrestling figures, to the point where if I see things that I think need to be said, I'm going to say them, because if Mayor Aaron doesn't speak up and try to fix things for these women's wrestling figures, then I don't know who will. And I'm not saying that I'm going to make a difference or anything, but my goal is to make a difference for these women's wrestling figures, because they're awesome and I love them and I'm so passionate about this and about the channel. So I just had to get all this off my chest for today. But I truly do appreciate every single one of you watching this video. I love y'all. And like I said, this video is just my opinions, but I respect your opinions, and I'd love to hear in the comments what figures you didn't like this past year. So with that being said, thanks for stopping by LumberJillville. Women's wrestling lives here. To become an official resident, make sure to hit subscribe and join the community. Have a great night, y'all.